The rain outside Victor Coleman's office window created a sound that he had become very familiar with over the years. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping that seemed to match the loneliness he had grown used to. Victor, now 60 years old, sat behind his large mahogany desk, his salt and pepper hair and serious face reflected in the glass. He looked out at the city lights below, their glow fighting against the darkness that had settled over Seattle. His corner office in the Coleman Financial Services building stood as a symbol of his success, but it also stood as a testament to his isolation. He had built a life full of achievements, but it was a life he had built alone. His thoughts drifted back to a time many years ago when he had made a decision that still haunted him every day. Victor's fingers traced the edge of his desk, the smooth wood offering little comfort as his mind wandered back to that rainy night 43 years ago. It had been a night much like this one. The basketball court had been slick with rain, and the words of the doctor still echoed in his ears. Isabella, the woman he loved, had stood there unaware of what he was about to do. Victor had made a choice that would break both their hearts, a choice that had changed the course of his life forever. The crack of thunder jolted Victor back to the present, his thoughts interrupted by the sudden noise. Most of his employees had already gone home for the night, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the endless piles of financial reports that had become his refuge. The clock on the wall read 11:42 p.m. It was just another late night at the office, and Victor was gathering his things, preparing to leave, when a loud scream pierced through the steady rhythm of the rain. His heart skipped a beat as he rushed to the window, scanning the parking lot below. Through the rain, Victor saw a young woman stumbling, one hand protectively cradling her pregnant belly, while the other reached out for support against a parked car. A man's voice shouted in the distance, filled with barely contained rage. "Get back here!" Victor's heart raced as he watched the scene unfold. The woman was trying to get away from the man, but the rain and her condition slowed her down. Without thinking, Victor grabbed his umbrella and rushed toward the elevator. By the time he reached the entrance of the building, the woman had made it to the covered area near the doors. Victor could see her clearly now. She couldn't be more than 25, and her face was a mixture of fear and determination. Her clothes clung to her soaked form, and she was visibly shivering. "Please," she whispered, looking between Victor and the parking lot. "Help me." Victor didn't hesitate. He quickly ushered her inside and used his key card to access the secure elevator. As the doors closed, Victor glanced out one last time and caught sight of an enraged young man emerging from the rain. His fists were clenched, and his eyes were locked on the building. The elevator's harsh fluorescent light revealed a bruise already forming on the woman's cheek. She was struggling to catch her breath, her hands still wrapped protectively around her belly. "You're safe now," Victor assured her, trying to comfort her without invading her space. "I'm Victor Coleman. This is my building." "Carmen," she said, her voice trembling. "Carmen Harper, my husband. I can't go back to him. Not anymore. Not with the baby." Victor's heart sank as he led her to his private bathroom where he kept a spare set of clothes for emergencies. He handed her a clean dress shirt and sweatpants, knowing they would be too big for her, but that they would be dry. As Carmen changed in the bathroom, Victor's mind raced with memories of another woman he had promised to protect many years ago. The guilt from his past burned in his chest as he waited for her to emerge. He called building security to make sure the husband, Javier, wouldn't make it upstairs. When Carmen came out of the bathroom, she looked a little better. The dry clothes made her look less like someone who had been running for her life. Her eyes, still full of fear, were also filled with a kind of determination that reminded Victor of someone else, someone he had loved and lost. "Thank you," Carmen said, her voice shaky. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't helped me." When was the last time you ate? Victor asked, noticing how weak she looked. She swayed slightly as she stood. This morning, I think Xavier, my husband, he gets angry when I eat without him, and he didn't come home for dinner. Carmen's voice cracked as she said this, revealing the truth of her situation. Victor's jaw tightened at the mention of the abuse. He walked to his office mini-fridge and pulled out a sandwich that he had forgotten to eat earlier. It's not much, but it's something, he said as he handed it to her. As Carmen ate, Victor watched the rain continue to pour outside. He could see Javier still pacing in the parking lot below, occasionally looking up at the building. The sight of the man stirred something protective in Victor, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, a feeling he thought he had buried long ago. You can't go back to him, Victor said quietly, his voice firm. Carmen's hand trembled as she finished the sandwich. I don't have anywhere else to go. My mother, we haven't spoken in months. Javier isolated me from everyone. Victor's mind made a decision in that moment, a decision that would change the course of both their lives. I have a guest house. It's secure, separate from the main house, with its own entrance. You can stay there until you figure out your next steps. Carmen looked at him with suspicion. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Victor paused, his voice quiet but filled with regret. Because 43 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I hurt someone I loved because I thought I was protecting her. I've spent every day since then trying to live with that decision. Maybe helping you is my chance to finally do something right. As the thunder rolled outside, they sat in silence, each of them weighing the weight of the moment. Finally, Carmen spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. He'll look for me. Let him try, Victor replied, his tone hardening. My property has the best security money can buy. You'll be safe there. Victor watched Carmen place her hand on her belly, whispering something to her unborn child. The gesture was so tender, so protective, that it made Victor's chest tighten with emotion. He didn't know it then, but Carmen was Isabella Johnson, the woman he had loved and left behind all those years ago. He had no idea that this rainy night would begin a series of events that would force him to confront his past and finally face the consequences of his choices. The rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing away the old and making room for whatever tomorrow would bring. As Victor looked at Carmen, something deep inside him recognized a familiar spirit. The same fierce determination he had once seen in Isabella's eyes. And for the first time in decades, Victor felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crack. The next morning, the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a clear, crisp morning. Carmen stood at the window of the guest house, watching the sun light up Victor's beautiful garden. The peaceful scene seemed unreal after the chaos of the night before. The guest house was better than anything she had ever imagined. It was a modern, one-bedroom cottage with its own kitchen and a security system that felt more like a fortress than just a simple alarm. Carmen absent-mindedly rubbed her 7-month pregnant belly as she gazed out at the peaceful surroundings. The baby kicked as if sensing her unease about accepting help from a stranger. A knock on the door startled her, and when she checked the security camera feed, she saw Victor standing outside with a paper bag and a laptop case. Breakfast, he called softly, and some things you might need. I'll leave them here if you're not comfortable opening the door. Carmen hesitated for a moment before unlocking the door. She wasn't sure if she could trust Victor, but something about his kind eyes and gentle manner made her want to. You can come in, she said, stepping back to keep a safe distance. Victor entered and placed the items on the kitchen counter. Bagels, fruit, orange juice, he said, and the laptop is secure. No tracking, no risks. He smiled at her, though she could see the weight of his own burdens in his face. Carmen looked at the food, then at the laptop. She didn't know where to start, but she felt a little less alone now. She took the food and thanked Victor before sitting down. "I can't contact my mother yet," Carmen said, her voice low. "Javier, he convinced me that my mother didn't support me, that she was prejudiced against him for being white. I said horrible things to her." Victor's face darkened as he listened. He knew exactly what Javier was doing. "Men like him are experts at manipulation," Victor said. "They isolate you, make you doubt yourself and everyone who loves you. I know, because I once convinced myself that pushing away someone I loved was for their own good." He looked away for a moment, lost in his own memories. I was wrong. Carmen was about to respond when her phone beeped. She froze when she saw Javier's message. "I know where you are. That old man can't protect you forever. Think about what's best for our baby." Victor saw the fear in her eyes as she handed him the phone. He read the message, his jaw tightening. "He's bluffing. He can't know where you are. The security system, it's airtight." Carmen's voice trembled. "You don't understand. He has connections everywhere, at his law firm, in the police department. That's why I never reported the abuse. Nobody would believe me over him." Victor placed the phone down carefully. "I know something about connections too, and unlike Javier, I've spent decades building mine." He pulled out his own phone and dialed a number. "Michael, it's Victor Coleman. Remember that favor you owe me? I need everything you can find on a lawyer named Javier Harper. Focus on any complaints or charges that might have been buried." Carmen watched him, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know much about Victor's past, but she could see the strength in him now. He was a man who had suffered but had also learned how to fight back. After the call, Victor stood up. "I have to go to the office for a few hours. Will you be okay here?" he asked. "The security team is on high alert. You have my number." "I'll be fine," Carmen said, though her voice wavered slightly. "I just need to think about my next steps." Victor paused at the door, then turned back to her. "Whatever you decide, you don't have to do it alone anymore. Not anymore." When Victor left, Carmen felt both relieved and anxious. She spent the day in the guest house, exploring the rooms, finding clothes and toiletries that Victor had thoughtfully stocked for her. The laptop he had given her allowed her to research domestic violence resources and legal aid. As she typed her mother's name into the search engine, she found countless articles about Isabella Johnson's successful career as a basketball coach. Tears blurred Carmen's vision as she looked at pictures of her mother, realizing how much she had hurt her and how much Javier had manipulated her. When a noise outside startled her, Carmen quickly closed the laptop. Looking at the security feed, she saw a delivery truck leaving Victor's driveway. Her heart rate slowed, but the incident reminded her that fear had become a constant companion. Back in his office, Victor sat staring at a photograph of Isabella Johnson, the woman he had once loved. He traced his fingers over the image, remembering the way she used to laugh, her determined spirit that had once filled his heart with hope. Carmen was on the court when Victor's phone buzzed. It was a message from his investigator. The investigator had found something about Javier Harper. Javier had been in trouble before with complaints about hurting people, but the cases had mysteriously disappeared. But there was more. The investigator found out about Javier's first wife. She didn't leave him, like Javier said. She disappeared 6 years ago, and the police couldn't find out what happened. Victor's hands squeezed into fists. He had spent years hiding his past mistakes. He had built walls around his heart. But seeing Carmen strong and brave made him want to protect her. He couldn't let another woman down, not like he had with Isabella. As evening came, rain started pouring down in Seattle. Victor looked at the sky from his office window. He thought about the two women who had changed his life. One from the past and one from the present. In the guest house, Carmen was feeling nervous. She had been hiding there for 3 days. She decided to look through the attic. The attic was small and mostly empty, but she saw some old boxes. One box caught her attention. It was old, and part of it looked like it had been damaged by water. When she picked it up, it broke open, spilling out some old letters tied together with a blue ribbon. They were all addressed to someone named Isabella Johnson, but they didn't have any stamps on them. They had never been sent. Carmen's heart skipped a beat. Isabella Johnson was her mother's name. Why did Victor have these letters? She picked one up and was about to open it when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Victor asking if she was okay. She quickly put everything back into the box except for one letter, which she slipped into her pocket. When she went downstairs, she saw Victor walking toward her. His face was serious. "My investigator found something about Javier's past," he said. "He didn't tell the truth about his first wife. She disappeared 6 years ago. The police never figured out what happened, but my investigator found out that Javier's company paid the detective to make the case go away." Two other women also said Javier hurt them, but the cases were dropped, and Javier's company paid to make them go away. Carmen's heart sank. She had known that Javier was dangerous, but hearing this made it even worse. "He always told me I was imagining things. He said I was too sensitive. I started to believe him," she said, her voice shaking. "That's what abusers do," Victor said softly. "They make you doubt what's real." Carmen remembered her mom saying something like that. The last time they talked, her mother said almost the same thing. Carmen pulled the letter out of her pocket and asked, "Why do you have letters from my mom in your attic?" Victor's face turned pale. He looked at the letter for a long time before he spoke. "I knew her," he said, his voice quiet, "a long time ago. I loved her." Thunder rumbled in the distance as Victor said this, and Carmen felt like the world was turning upside down. Victor continued, "We were young. She was 15 and I was 17. We dreamed of playing basketball together. But then I had an accident and I couldn't play anymore. I thought I was protecting her by leaving. I thought I was giving her the chance to follow her dreams without being tied to someone like me, someone who couldn't even play basketball." Carmen's throat felt tight. She had never heard her mom talk about Victor. But sometimes, when it rained, her mom would sit by the window with a sad look on her face. "I wrote letters for years after I left, trying to explain, but I never had the courage to send them," Victor said, his voice full of regret. Just then, Carmen's phone buzzed again. It was an email from her mom. Carmen opened it and read, "My beautiful girl, I've been waiting for your email every day since you left. I never believed you truly hated me. I'm on my way to Seattle. Send me your address and I'll be there soon. We'll face everything together." Tears filled Carmen's eyes. "She's coming to Seattle," Carmen said, her voice shaking. "She wants to help." Before Victor could answer, they saw on the security monitors that Javier's car had arrived. Javier stepped out with a big smile on his face, but there was something scary about it. He pressed the intercom and said, "I know you're in there, Carmen. Did you think you could hide from me? Did you think your mom could protect you?" Maybe Victor Coleman would like to explain why he's so interested in my wife. I wonder what Isabella Johnson would think about that. Victor went pale. "He knows," he whispered. Javier had figured out everything about the accident, the breakup, and the letters. Victor took a deep breath. "We need to move," he said. "There's a panic room in the main house." As they hurried to the house, the rain poured harder. They could hear Javier's men trying to break through the security gate. The police sirens were getting louder, but Carmen knew it wasn't over. Javier had been waiting for this moment. Once inside the panic room, Victor moved quickly to the security monitors. The room was full of screens showing every part of the property. "The police will be here in 3 minutes," Victor said, working fast. "But Javier has connections in the police. We need help from someone else." Carmen's phone buzzed again. It was another message from her mom. She was asking for the address. Victor said quickly, "Don't send it. Javier is probably watching everything. We need to keep your mom safe." Just then, there was a huge explosion and the security gate was destroyed. Javier walked through the smoke, looking calm. "I have to admire your setup," Javier's voice came through the speakers. "But did you think your money could protect her from me? I own half the judges in Washington state. The police won't help you. Let's talk." Victor's face hardened. Javier's right about one thing. The police won't be enough. But I have something Javier doesn't know about. Carmen looked at him. "More secrets?" she asked, her voice tense. Victor nodded. "After I left your mother, I didn't just become a financial advisor. I worked for the FBI for 15 years, catching criminals trying to hide their money. I've been gathering information about Javier's company for months. I have evidence on him." Carmen was shocked. "You knew about him before you helped me?" "No," Victor said. "I was investigating his company for money laundering. I didn't know about his personal life until you showed up, but now we have everything we need." Javier's men were getting closer. Victor handed Carmen a thick file. "This file has everything I found on Javier's company: bank records, secret accounts, evidence of tampering with the jury. Enough to send him to prison for a long time." Victor pulled up a document on one of the screens. He found something surprising. Javier's law firm helps rich men with divorce cases. In the past 5 years, 3 of their wives had disappeared after they said their husbands were hurting them. Even though the police said the women left on their own, there was evidence that suggested something different. As thunder rumbled outside, Carmen was shocked by what she read. "He's not just hurting people," she said. "He's making women disappear when they try to leave." Before Victor could say anything, the screen showed a warning. Someone was trying to hack into the house's electrical system. The lights flickered. "We need to stop them," Victor said, typing fast on the keyboard. "But I'm better at this." He quickly turned on another system and set off the house's sprinklers. Javier's men were surprised, getting soaked as they stumbled around in the water. But Javier was standing in the garden, his expensive suit wet from the rain, smiling coldly at the camera. "Time's running out, Carmen," Javier's voice called out from the speakers. "Your mom is probably on her way. Imagine how she'll feel when she finds out you've been hiding with Victor Coleman. She'll be heartbroken when she learns you chose him over your own family." Carmen's phone buzzed again. It was a message from her mom. "The police aren't helping. Something's wrong. Tell me where you are, baby, please." Victor looked at the message and saw police cars outside. "Those officers work for Javier," he said. "This is going to get messy." Carmen looked at her phone, then at the monitors showing Javier standing in the rain, and then at Victor, the man who had both hurt her mom and saved her life. She made a decision. "We can't keep hiding," she said. "Mom needs to know the truth. All of it. And Javier has to face justice." Victor looked at her. "You're right," he said. "But we need to be smart." He grabbed his FBI phone. "We need the right help." While he made the call, Carmen watched Javier on the screen. He looked like a man who was sure he had won. But for the first time since meeting him, Carmen wasn't scared. Her baby kicked again, stronger this time. She placed both hands on her belly. "Grandma's coming," she whispered. "And this time, we're all going to face the truth together." Meanwhile, at the airport, Isabella Johnson stood holding her phone. She had coached basketball for 43 years, and she was good at reading situations. Right now, she felt something was very wrong. When she had called the local police about Carmen, they were vague and evasive, like they didn't want her asking questions. A man in a suit came up to her. "I'm Agent Daniel Cruz from the FBI. We need to talk about your daughter." Isabella's heart stopped. Is she alive?" she asked. Cruz assured her quickly that Carmen was okay, but there were complications. As they got into a waiting car, Cruz told her about Javier, his law firm, and everything that had been happening. When Isabella asked who was helping her daughter, Cruz hesitated. "It's someone you know. Victor Coleman." The name hit Isabella hard. She remembered Victor, a 17-year-old boy with kind eyes. It had been so long since she thought about him. Back at the house, Victor and Carmen watched the FBI arrive on the monitors. Javier's men were backing off, but Javier stayed in the garden, still trying to control Carmen. "Your mom's almost here," Javier's voice said through the speakers. "Did you tell her about the baby? About how you're hiding with a man who left black women when things got tough?" Carmen saw Victor flinch. "He's trying to turn us against each other," she said. "We can't let him." Victor nodded, though his face was pale. "I've imagined this moment for years, but not like this." Suddenly, the screen flashed an alert. Multiple FBI vehicles were approaching. The corrupt police officers who had worked with Javier started looking nervous. They were stuck between protecting Javier and the FBI. "Mr. Harper," a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "This is the FBI. We have federal warrants for your arrest. Your firm's accounts have been frozen. It's over." Javier laughed coldly. "It's not over. You have no idea how many powerful men are involved in this. If I fall, they'll all fall with me." He turned to the camera and looked at Carmen. "Think about your baby, Carmen. Think about the life we could have. All you have to do is walk out that door." But Carmen was determined. She saw her mother arrive in an FBI car. Isabella stood tall, looking strong and confident despite the rain. She looked around, taking in the scene, then found the security camera. "I've spent my life teaching young women to stand up to men who try to break them," she said loudly. "Did you really think I wouldn't see what you were doing to my daughter?" Javier wasn't prepared for this. "Mrs. Johnson, this is a private matter between my wife and me," he said, trying to keep control. Isabella laughed sharply. "I've spent my career fighting men who hide behind laws they twist for their own gain. Not this time." She turned to the corrupt police officers. "You're protecting a man who makes women disappear. I've sent everything I know to every major news outlet. By morning, everyone will know what you've been covering up." Inside the house, Carmen and Victor watched in awe. "That's my mom," Carmen whispered proudly. Javier still didn't understand what he was up against. Victor's eyes were on Isabella. "She's always been the strongest person I know." Then, Javier moved quickly. He pulled a gun from his jacket. "Enough!" he shouted. "Carmen belongs to me. The baby belongs to me. I won't let you take them." FBI agents raised their weapons, but Isabella didn't flinch. "My daughter doesn't belong to anyone," she said firmly, "and neither does her baby. The only thing you own, Javier, is the consequences of your actions." In the panic room, Victor made a decision. "We can't hide in here while your mom faces him. Let's go." He pressed a button and a hidden door opened, leading to a safe exit behind the house. They would come up from behind Javier. Carmen nodded, feeling her mother's strength filling her with courage. As they walked through the secret passage, she felt the baby kick again. "The baby's strong," she whispered. "Just like Mom." Outside, the tension was rising. Javier's men were retreating, and the corrupt officers were starting to back away. But Javier was losing control. "You're all traitors," he screamed. Everything he built was falling apart. Isabella finished his sentence for him. "You tried to break us, but you never understood something I learned on the basketball court. True strength isn't about control. It's about lifting each other up." Carmen and Victor stepped out from behind the house, and Javier spun toward them, his gun shaking. "It's over, Javier," Carmen said, holding her belly. "You don't control me anymore. You never did." The rain continued to fall, washing away years of secrets and pain. In that moment, everything changed. Javier's gun wavered as he tried to decide who to aim at. The FBI agents were ready, but Isabella's voice broke the tension. "Stay back," she ordered, facing Javier calmly. Javier's voice cracked. "None of you understand what's at stake," he said, his eyes on Carmen. "If I can't have my child, then no one will." He aimed the gun at her belly. The shot that rang out surprised everyone. Javier staggered back, clutching his shoulder. The gun fell from his hand. Victor stood behind him, his gun steady, smoke rising from the barrel. Federal agents never fully retire, Victor said quietly. The FBI agents quickly took control, arresting Javier, who screamed threats as they cuffed him. His men and the corrupt officers were caught and detained. Isabella held her daughter, both of them trembling with emotions too big for words. When they finally pulled apart, Carmen looked at her mom with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. Isabella wiped her daughter's tears. "You're not the first strong woman to be fooled by a man who uses love as a weapon," she said softly. "What matters is that you found your strength again." Victor stood nearby, watching the reunion with a mix of relief and regret. He started to walk away to give them privacy, but Isabella called out. "Victor Coleman," she said, still trying to protect everyone by pushing them away. He turned back slowly, meeting her eyes after all these years. "Victor, I never thought," Isabella started, but he interrupted. "That's always been your problem," she said gently. "You think too much about what might go wrong instead of fighting for what could go right." Inside the house, the three of them sat together. The storm still raged outside, but inside, the air felt different. Carmen spoke softly. "I found your letters, the ones you never sent." Victor's hands shook. "I wrote them for years, trying to explain, to apologize, but I always talked myself out of sending them. I thought it was too late." Isabella looked at him. "It nearly was." She sighed, her voice heavy with old pain. "Do you know what it felt like thinking I wasn't worth fighting for?" Victor's voice cracked. "I thought I was protecting you. After the accident, seeing my dreams die while yours were just beginning, I couldn't bear the thought of holding you back." Isabella shook her head. "That wasn't your choice to make." Victor looked ashamed. "You're right. I was young and scared. I made mistakes, but seeing Carmen in danger, I knew I had to try to make things right." Carmen watched them, seeing the feelings between her parents. She said carefully, "Mom, when Javier was controlling me, making me doubt everything, I finally understood why you pushed me to be independent. Why you taught me that love should lift you up, not tear you down." Isabella held her daughter's hand. "I learned those lessons the hard way. First with Victor, then watching you with Javier. But breaking free is only the first step. The harder part is learning to trust again." A quiet moment passed, broken only by the sound of rain against the windows. Agent Cruz came in briefly to update them. Javier was being processed, and his connections were already turning on each other, giving evidence to save themselves. Carmen suddenly asked, "Will this help find the women who disappeared?" "We'll do everything we can," Cruz assured her before leaving them alone. As the adrenaline wore off, Carmen felt the baby kick again. "May I?" Isabella asked, holding out her hand. When Carmen nodded, Isabella placed her hand on her daughter's belly, feeling the baby move. "Strong, just like you," Isabella whispered. Victor watched them, seeing the bond between mother and daughter that Javier could never break. "Isabella," he said softly, "I know I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness." Isabella looked at him. "You're right, you don't." But there was something softer in her eyes now. "Forgiveness isn't something you ask for, Victor. It's something you earn, little by little, choice by choice." Outside, the storm had stopped. The rain softened to a light patter, and the air felt fresh, like the storm had washed away more than just the dirt in the city. "What happens now?" Carmen asked, looking at her mom and Victor, the man who saved her life. Isabella squeezed Carmen's hand. "Now we heal together, all of us, if we choose to." The words hung in the air like a promise, or maybe a challenge. Victor looked at the two strong women. One was the love he'd lost, and the other was the daughter he'd helped save. He felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The rain kept falling softly against the windows, but inside, a new story was starting. The week after Javier's arrest was a blur of interviews, legal stuff, and news stories. Victor's guest house became a safe place for Carmen and Isabella, while he stayed away in the main house, giving them space. The rain had finally stopped and the sky was clear. just like the secrets that had been hidden for so long. One morning, Carmen sat in the guest house garden, watching the sun paint the wet flowers gold. The baby was kicking, like it knew everything was better now. She heard footsteps and turned, expecting her mom, but it was Victor holding 2 mugs of tea. "Your mom said this is your favorite," he said, handing her one. "She's still sleeping. Yesterday's court stuff was tiring for all of us." Carmen took the tea. "The lawyer says they're finding more victims, women who were scared to speak before. Javier's network is falling apart." Victor sat down. "Agent Cruz called. They found some old records about Javier's first wife in a hidden safe at his firm. They're checking out a place in Oregon." Carmen put her hand on her belly. "All these years, I thought I was alone. If I had known." "Men like Javier are experts at manipulating people," Victor said softly. "They make their victims doubt their own reality. Your mom taught me that." Carmen looked at him. "You've been talking?" Victor nodded. "Late last night, after you went to bed, we talked about everything, the past, the present, and the choices we made. She told me about raising you alone, how hard it was to be a single mom in the coaching world, how every step she took had to be twice as hard because of who she was." Carmen asked quietly, "And you? What did you tell her?" Victor tightened his grip on his mug. "I told her leaving her was the biggest mistake of my life. I watched her succeed from afar, proud of her, but I was too scared to reach out. And when I saw you that night in the rain, it felt like a second chance to make things right." Inside the guest house, Isabella stood by the window, watching her daughter and Victor talk. She couldn't hear their words, but she could tell from their movements that they were both trying to get closer, but afraid of making a mistake. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Agent Cruz. More news about Javier's first wife. "They found her," Isabella said. "Javier's first wife." Carmen and Victor came over. "What's wrong?" Carmen asked. Isabella took Victor's hand. "They found her," she said quietly. Victor looked at them both. "I keep thinking about choices, ones we make and the ones made for us." Isabella nodded. "You chose to leave to protect me. I chose to raise Carmen alone. And Carmen," she looked at her daughter, "you chose to break free when you found out who Javier really was." Carmen nodded. "You taught me how to stand up for myself. Every time you fought against discrimination, every time you didn't let others tell you who you were, I was watching." Just then, Carmen gasped and doubled over in pain. "Something's wrong," she said through clenched teeth. The next hour was chaos. They rushed Carmen to the hospital. In the emergency room, doctors worked quickly to stop the early labor. They told Carmen she needed to rest or the baby might come too soon. Isabella and Victor waited outside. Victor thought back to the time when he was hurt and made a decision that changed his life. "I should have been there when you were pregnant with Carmen," he said. "You had to do it all alone." "You should have been," Isabella agreed. "But you're here now. That counts." Inside, Carmen was asking for her mom. "I'm here, baby," Isabella said as she hurried inside. Victor stayed outside, looking out the window at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere, Javier was facing the consequences for what he did, but here, in the hospital, 3 generations of healing were starting. After a while, Dr. Mendoza came in with more news. "The baby is stable, but Carmen has had injuries we didn't know about. Broken ribs, a concussion. Javier was hurting her, but he was careful to leave no marks." Victor's voice grew tight with anger. "I should have done more. I missed the signs." Isabella put her hand on his. "We all missed them. But now we focus on healing and we make sure this never happens to anyone else." Carmen stirred in her sleep and Isabella hummed a lullaby. Victor smiled softly. "I remember hearing you sing that when you practiced basketball." "It was a song my grandmother taught me," Isabella said. "She said it gave strength to women who wouldn't be broken." Carmen woke up, looking at them both. "Are you still here?" she asked. "We're not going anywhere," Isabella promised. Carmen smiled a little and then winced in pain. A nurse came in and Carmen's phone buzzed with another news alert. They found more bodies in Oregon, all women who tried to leave abusive marriages. Victor went to the window, feeling guilty for not digging deeper into Javier's firm. I should have known, he said softly. Isabella said firmly, now we focus on helping others, on healing, and making sure no one else has to go through this. Carmen nodded. We'll tell their stories. They deserve to be heard. Victor looked at them both. I've been thinking about the foundation I started. Maybe it's time to do more. We could help women leave abusive situations, give them legal help and safe places to go. Isabella agreed. Yes, give them the resource to break the cyclist cycle before it's too late. Carmen smiled, feeling the baby kick again. She knows she's safe now. 3 weeks later, Victor's living room was filled with papers and laptops as they worked together to bring down Javier's network. Carmen, still on bed rest, was coordinating everything with victim advocacy groups. Another woman had come forward, ready to tell her story. Carmen smiled. She's been hiding the evidence all this time. Now she's ready to testify. Victor entered, looking serious but determined. Javier's firm wasn't just helping abusers. They were teaching them how to trick the system. The room went quiet. Then Victor spoke again. The foundation is official now. It's called the Isabella Johnson Foundation for Women's Empowerment. Tears filled Isabella's eyes. You named it after me? Who better? Victor said with admiration. You've spent your life showing women their strength. Now we can help them use it. Carmen smiled and rubbed her belly. Someone's kicking again. She knows she's safe. Carmen smiled and said, I found out yesterday at my doctor's appointment. I was waiting for the right time to tell you both. She took a deep breath. I want to name her Lucia Isabella Coleman Harper. Lucia for the strength to break free, Isabella for my mom, and Coleman because without you, Victor, we might not be here. The room felt emotional. Isabella took her daughter's hand while Victor stood still, amazed by the honor of having his name chosen. Victor tried to speak, but his voice was rough. I don't deserve this. Carmen interrupted him, saying firmly, Yes, you do. You showed me that not all men use their strength to hurt or control. Some use it to protect, to heal, and to make things right. A knock on the door broke the moment, and Agent Cruz entered with a big file. Sorry to interrupt, but you all need to see this. Javier is taking a deal. He's going to tell us everything. Judges, police officers, lawyers, everyone, the whole network. The news was shocking. Carmen's hand tightened around her mother's hand as Cruz continued. Javier's looking at life in prison. The evidence about his first wife sealed the deal. But there's more. He opened the file and said, His confession led us to 3 more places where women were buried. These were cold cases from the past decade. All women who tried to leave abusive marriages. Their families can finally have closure. Isabella stood up, her coaching instincts kicking in. We need to contact the other survivors and tell them it's safe to come forward now. Victor nodded and said, Our legal team is ready to help anyone who wants to testify. Safe houses will be ready in a month. Carmen watched them work, seeing the perfect partnership they could have had all those years ago. Her mother's passion mixed with Victor's smart thinking. The baby kicked again, and Carmen smiled, thinking about her daughter growing up in a world of such strength and love. Carmen suggested, we should write everything down, create a guide for other communities to help them find and stop networks like this. Isabella said, already started. I've been writing about the patterns we've found, how these men choose their victims and how they trick the system. Knowledge is power, especially for women trying to break free. Victor moved behind Isabella's chair and rested his hand on her shoulder. She leaned into the touch, not realizing it. Carmen saw Agent Cruz smile. He'd seen how Isabella and Victor had slowly started reconnecting over the past weeks. As the day went on, more survivors came forward, sharing their stories, adding more pieces to help understand how these abuse networks worked and how to stop them. The baby kicked again, like it was energized by the purpose in the room. My grandmother used to say that healing happens in circles, Isabella said, watching Carmen rub her belly. Each generation has a chance to break old patterns, to do better than the last. Victor added softly, 3 generations of strong women. Carmen looked around the room at her mother's quiet strength, Victor's gentle determination, and the evidence of their shared mission on every surface. The rain had started again outside, but it no longer felt bad. It felt like renewal, washing away the old and making room for something new. Carmen whispered to her unborn daughter, Lucia Isabella Coleman Harper, "You're going to be born into a world where women lift each other up, where love doesn't mean control, where strength means breaking cycles instead of breaking people." The day went on, filled with plans, purpose, healing, and hope. Outside, Seattle's rain kept falling, but inside, the storms had finally cleared. 6 months after Javier's deal, Seattle's spring brought warm sunshine. The guesthouse garden, now full of flowers, hosted a small celebration for 2 big events: the Isabella Johnson Foundation's first month of success and Lucia Isabella Coleman Harper's first month of life. Carmen sat in a comfy garden chair, holding her sleeping daughter. She watched her mother and Victor organize the foundation's newest project. The past months had changed all their lives in ways they never expected. "The second safe house opens next week," Isabella said, looking at her tablet. "We have 3 families ready to move in." Victor nodded and made notes on his laptop. "The security systems are in place. The legal team is ready." Carmen smiled, thinking of Rosa Vasquez, who had supported her during Javier's trial. "Rosa agreed to be a counselor for the new women," Isabella added. The foundation had already helped 20 women escape from abusive situations, and many more were reaching out for help every day. Lucia stirred in Carmen's arms, reaching for the air with her tiny hands. The baby had a mix of both her parents' features, but was her own unique self. "Someone's waking up," Isabella said with a smile. She reached for Lucia, and the baby settled into her grandmother's arms, content and peaceful. Victor said quietly, "I finished the paperwork today. Javier's firm is officially gone. All their money is now in the foundation's fund to help victims." Carmen felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Is it really over?" she asked. Isabella nodded. "Javier will spend his life in prison, and his network is gone. But our work is just beginning." Just then, Isabella's phone buzzed. "Another survivor found our website. She's in Boston, looking for help to leave her abusive husband." "I'll call our partners on the East Coast," Victor said, reaching for his phone. "We can have her somewhere safe tonight." Carmen watched them, amazed at how they worked so well together. Her mother and Victor had found their way back to each other, their love deeper for having spent so many years apart. They were planning a small wedding in the fall under the same basketball hoop where they had first fallen in love. Lucia began to fuss, and Carmen stood to pick her up. As she settled her daughter against her shoulder, she saw Rosa Vasquez arriving for the celebration with her 2 children. "Rosa's here," Victor announced, moving to welcome them. The children ran straight to the baby, fascinated by Lucia's tiny face. "How many times do I have to tell you to call me Rosa?" Rosa laughed, hugging everyone. She looked much younger now, the fear that had once weighed on her gone. More people arrived, other survivors, lawyers, and advocates. Everyone brought food, stories, and a determination to help others find freedom. The garden was full of voices and laughter. Healing was happening. Carmen sat between her mother and Victor on the porch swing. Lucia slept peacefully in her baby carrier, surrounded by love. "I found something yesterday," Victor said softly. "One of the letters I wrote to Isabella but never sent." He pulled it out from his pocket. Isabella took it gently, surprised. "You kept them all?" "Everyone except for one," Victor said. "I think it's time for a new kind of letter." He pulled out a fresh envelope. "This one's for Lucia. It's about how her strength brought this family together and helped break a cycle of abuse." Carmen felt tears in her eyes as she watched her mother lean against Victor, their hands held together. Their journey had been difficult, but the destination was worth it. Isabella suggested, "We should all write letters to Lucia. Tell her our stories, the real ones, about falling down and getting back up, about finding strength in broken places." Rosa joined them on the porch. "Letters for all of them," she said. "Every child born to a survivor, so they know they come from strength, not shame." The idea spread through the gathering. Everyone started sharing their stories and planning letters, creating a message of hope for future generations. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Lucia woke up with a happy sound. Carmen picked her up and faced the crowd of survivors and supporters. "To Lucia," she said clearly, "and to every child born free from fear, may they never know the chains we broke for them." The crowd echoed, "To Lucia," their voices strong with purpose. Later that night, after the guests left and Lucia was sleeping peacefully, Carmen found her mother and Victor dancing slowly in the garden. No music played, only the sound of their hearts. Seattle's rain began to fall softly, blessing the garden. But now, after everything they had been through, they knew the rain didn't always mean storms. Sometimes it meant growth, renewal, and washing away old pain to make room for new joy. Lucia stirred in her sleep, dreaming in a world made safer by those who loved her. Outside her window, 3 generations of healing stood together. Their shadows merged in the rain, in the garden where their story had started again. The cycles were broken. The legacy of love had won. And in the end, that was all that mattered. If you could write a letter to your past self about abusive or toxic relationships, what advice would you give to yourself? How has this experience shaped your view of true love and self-worth? This question connects to Carmen and Isabella's journey of breaking painful cycles and finding strength. Their experiences can inspire others to do the same. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.